Welcome back to the channel. Before I get started, I'd like to say thanks to our sponsor for today's video, Blade and Beam. They allowed me to check out this folder for review, and they have some really awesome things on their site. Every Friday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, they drop new EDC gear, blades, and if you hadn't checked them out already, definitely go do yourself a favor. They have some awesome flashlights, awesome EDC gear, and some very nice quality premium knives. They sent this folder in for review. First time I'd ever really heard of this brand, I guess you could say. This is the Beans Blades Mini Warrior. Now this is a production folder modeled after his Mini Warrior fixed blade. He is a custom knife maker. And like I said, I didn't know a whole lot beforehand, but that's why I love doing this channel, because I get to experience a broad spectrum of knives. So the Mini Warrior comes in plenty different variations. If this one isn't your thing, they have micarta cover options. They have the different fat carbon cover options. You can get all blacked out DLC. They have regular weave, carbon fiber, and you can also get all titanium. They also had some super fancy pants, ones with some like Damasteel and stuff like that, and Zircotide, but those have already sold out. And by the end of this video, if you're interested in picking up a Mini Warrior, I will have Blade and Beam linked in the description on the side of this knife, and that's where you can find it. I'm pretty sure this is an exclusive to them. And the OEM to this knife is Riot. So this is definitely going to be a top-notch premium quality knife. And let's go through the specs real quick. You have an overall length of 7.25 inches. So a nice medium size EDC knife in my opinion. Fits my medium-sized hands perfectly, and it has a 3.25-inch Tanto blade of Bowler M390 stainless steel, which should have outstanding edge retention along with good corrosion resistance. The finish on this one has a vertical satin on your two primary grinds here, horizontal satin on your flats, and it seems to be like a blasted finish on the fullers. Gives it a nice contrast with all the different bevels. You also have a satin finish on the spine. You have a super robust tip there. That's one thing Tantos are usually good for, especially these Americanized Tantos, is that you have these very stout tips. Great for piercing and, doing twisting and turning, maybe even some light prying. Not saying I advocate that at all. You have a small row of very functional jimping. I mean, it grips the finger nicely. Riot, in my opinion, does some of the best at jimping. Now, I do think it could have benefited by coming out a little bit further, but on my pocket knives, I'm not all that worried about that. And the only markings you have on these is the Beans blades, maker's mark right there, and the blade steel right there. Your sharpening choil is good. You should be able to sharpen to around where my fingernail is right there before it'll start to widen at the heel. So unless you're changing the bevel dramatically, you should have several sharpenings. Being that this is Americanized Tanto, it still should be a fairly versatile blade. Not as versatile as, say, a low tip drop point because you don't have any belly here, but you have this nice long straight edge portion right here that is going to be great for in-hand cuts. You can have full power from heel to that tip right there because of that straight edge. And then as far as drag cuts go, you have this secondary point, and that point right there is high up there, so you don't have to worry about it coming in contact with anything. You should be able to use that to do drag cuts rather easily. You could also use the Tanto portion right there to do a little scraping if you needed to. And then, of course, like I said, piercing with that nice, thick, robust tip. The secondary tip on this Tanto is nice and crisp. You got a nice, clean transition there. Hopefully, y'all can see that. But yeah, nice and even on both sides. And when it comes to sharpening Americanized Tanto like this, it's actually an easy knife to sharpen. However, being that you have essentially four edges, you got one on this side, one on this side, one on this side, and one on this side, it may just take you a little bit longer. And if you want to keep that nice crisp transition, you're gonna have to be careful that you don't go over this and round that tip over. Same goes with this. Whenever I'm sharpening a Tanto, I treat it like two separate knives I'm sharpening. I sharpen this portion, and then usually I'll kick it up to where this portion is horizontal with my fixed angled system, and then I sharpen this portion. Being that this has some pretty thick, beefy stock coming in at 0.159 or 5/32 thick stock, your grind's going to be fairly robust. You got a very short grind height, and these are flat grinds. Your straight edge portion, the thinnest portion behind the edge, is around 22 thousandths, which is not bad. It should still slice fairly well. And then up toward the tip, behind the edge thickness is going to jump up to around 32 thousandths. So for your harder piercing, penetrating stuff, that's going to be perfect for that. Now, for the majority of the stuff I cut, except for the super dense stuff, this is going to be perfectly fine. It's just using that apex. So as long as this thing has a nice sharp edge, it should perform very well. Let's find out. Man, one thing that I'm happy to see is that Riot now sends their knives out nice and sharp. I remember when they first started, it seemed like that was the last thing they thought about, is sharpening a knife. But now this one has a really nice and sharp, crisp edge, and being that you have that straight edge portion before you get to the Tanto section, it's going to be a powerful cutter there. And these in-hand cuts doing this type of stuff is really going to excel here. And even though it's, you know, a more stout design, probably designed for more heavier use, you can still do this fairly easily. It's not like tearing the material or anything, because it's just using that apex to cut through it. Now, maybe the more dense stuff we'll see later on, but as of now, it's good. Now, right away, I noticed before I even started this that the ergos felt really, really nice, because you got good thickness to the scales. They fill out the hand nice. Now, the mini fits my medium-sized hands perfectly. If you have large, extra large hands, then you may not get a full 4-finger grip on it, but I'm able to get a lot of force into the wood, and it was very comfortable. Nothing poking and prodding me, no hot spots anywhere that I noticed, as long as your hand's not sitting on that ramp at the back of the scales. Now, right now I'm just trying to decide if I want to use the Tanto section to do this, which, you know, is a thicker portion, because, you know, it's higher toward that tip. So the thickness behind the edge is a lot thicker, or a good bit thicker, than the straight edge portion. Usually what I try to do is stay at the secondary tip, or secondary point, whatever you want to call it. That way you're kind of still in the thinnest portion where it transitions into the thicker portion. And I think in a little while I'll pull it up on a block, and that's the only reason I pull it up on the block. It's cutting it very well. It's nice and sharp, and you know, it made more sense for me to do it this way. I try not to do anything that is going to hurt my hands worse than they already are. So in that case, you know, it just makes the most sense. You don't have any belly on this because it's a Tanto, it's American Tanto, so there's no belly at that tip. And whenever I lifted it up this way, that solved the issue, so there we go. Not testing for edge retention, just making sure that nothing crazy happens with the apex. Make sure it doesn't get dull super quick. I mean, I have a good idea, you know, how M390 should feel by the time I finish all these tests. I've done enough of them. And yeah, it didn't feel like it was losing steam at all. I think we cut like 130 cuts or so. Nothing crazy, but definitely felt good the entire time we did this. Yeah, I'm just not the biggest fan of Tantos. You know, they're still versatile blades. They're just not as versatile as, say, a low tip drop point is, obviously, because of the lack of belly. But if you're looking for something with a nice stout tip or something to use a little bit heavier, usually Tantos are a good place to go. Now, I'm showing right here, I'm using that secondary tip to do drag cuts. So that's why I say it's pretty versatile, because you have 4 edges. You know, you have 2 straight edge sides, and then where it goes up to that tip. So lots of edge to use. You can try it in different ways, hold the handle different ways. But if you're looking for something with belly, of course, Tanto is definitely not the way to go for you, unless you go with a Japanese Tanto. A lot of there's a belly up to the tip. So excellent job for the type of knife it is. You did a lot better than I expected. Now, I thought it performed fairly well, especially for how thick it is toward that tip and stuff. I did some of that cutting with that tip area, like the sisal rope and stuff. It wasn't the sliciest I've ever used, but it wasn't the worst. Behind the Tanto edge, I thought it performed really, really well. Now, let's take a look at the deployment action of this knife. So you have the flipper tab and you have the fuller. So the flipper is perfect. It's nice and comfortable. You have some nice fine cut jimping. And if you want it where you just pull it back, it's rocketing out. You got a lot of mass to that hefty blade. So as soon as it breaks that detent and gets about halfway, it just takes over, and fairly controlled drop there. And then you have the fuller and it goes all the way down. So if you want to grab it low, because say if it has a stronger detent, you can easily reverse flick it. If you want to slow roll it, you can do that as well. And if you want to grab that fuller and pinch to open it, you can do that also. Riot usually nails the deployment, and this one's no different. Very nice crisp action. It's riding on ceramic bearings. It has a ceramic detent ball, giving it that glassy smooth action. Now let's look at the handle area. My particular sample has the black coated tie. You have a titanium bolster here. You have the Mars Valley fat carbon cover here. Now it is only on the show side. The back is just all titanium, and mine is all black washed on the back. You have that revolver cylinder looking pivot there. And unfortunately, that is a proprietary pivot. So in order to make adjustments to that, as you can see, there's no Torx heads. I got a lot of tools that could do that. You know, spanner wrench, and you may be able to buy a tool. I'm not too sure, but they're not the hardest. But I would have loved to see a Torx head in there, because I personally like to maintain my own tools. Then you have crisp Torx T8 throughout. These are titanium hardware, so if you want to anodize it to make it your own, you could do that. You have a small titanium backspacer, and you have a 3D milled titanium pocket clip. It is tip up, right hand carry only. I don't remember if they have lefty versions or not. You have a decent ramp underneath there, and you have good flex to that clip. And being this is a little bit heftier folder, you definitely want to hold it in there good. So see, going in the pocket, it goes over the lip of these jeans fairly easy. These aren't super thick. And that's all that you have sticking out. It does sit good up against this side, but you do have a flipper tab sticking out. So if you try to put your phone in there or anything, it's going to rub against that flipper tab. And on the way out, I was a little worried that it was going to get caught up in the lock relief. However, that retention spot underneath the clip right there is far enough in front to where I hadn't had any issues with bunching coming out of the pocket. You do have a hardened stainless steel lock insert that also acts as an over travel, so you can't overspring your lock bar. The lockup on this one, I would say, is around 30% or so. And your access to the lock bar is good. Even though it's flush with the show side scale, it's wide enough and you have deep enough chamfers that I can easily get my thumb in there, no problem. And this thing is bank vault. Like, I can't muscle any side to side or up and down plate at all. None. Very nice and tight lockup. Love seeing that. I'm not going to do any spine wax or anything because this is not my knife. Now you have fairly chunky blade stock, and you have a decent thickness to this knife and a titanium backspacer along with the pocket clip. No internal milling, but you do have all this milled out section for this top cover right here. Bringing the weight to 157.8 grams or 5.56 ounces. Now for some quick size comparisons, we have the Ontario Rat 1 and 2. It's a good bit smaller than the Rat 1, and it's a little bit bigger than the Rat 2. Next, we have the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3. It's a good bit smaller than the PM2, and it's, when I say a hair, longer than the Para 3. And it's almost identical in overall length to the Southern Grind Spider Monkey and the KB Knives Bluff. And lastly, it's almost identical in overall length to the Herman Knives Vespertillo and the Vero Engineering Synapse. All right, now for my nitpicks and complaints. I would have loved to see a standard Torx head on one side of this pivot. I'm not the biggest fan of having to find something to adjust this myself if it loosens up. I don't want to have to send this out if the blade loosens up. I want to be able to tighten it myself. Now, I have a spanner that'll fit that. I have several things that'll fit that to be able to do it myself, but it would have been nice to at least have Torx in the inside of that. And this is what I mean by that. See how it has on the Sharp Bar Designs, they have the actual Torx in the middle like that. It would have been nice to see that on this knife. I also would have loved to see the covers on this side as well, and the lock relief on the inside. keeps the knife looking very, very clean on the lock side. Plus, you don't ever have to worry about material getting bunched up in there. Even though it wasn't an issue with this knife, I always like to see it on the inside. I also, like I said, that covers just makes it look that much more clean. But, if that bothers you, you can get all tie and, it doesn't bother everybody. So it's not hurting the functionality of the knife whatsoever. But other than that, if you're looking for a very well made, I think it's a good looking knife, even though Tanto blades aren't really my thing. I can definitely appreciate them. And if you're looking for a beefy tank like Tanto, then this is an excellent, excellent option. Now, being that it's Riot, it's got a premium price tag, of course. They range from $370 for the micarta cover up to $445 for this particular variation. Now, they did have some that were more expensive than this one with the zircotai and the Damasteel blades, obviously, but those are now sold out. Once again, I'd like to thank Blade & Beam for allowing me to not only check this out, they allowed me to test this. Now, I probably won't do that for every knife that they send me to review because if I don't plan on buying it, I don't think I'll test it from now on because I feel really bad doing that. Then that means that they either have to sell this as a discounted knife or keep it themselves, and that's not really cool, and I don't really feel comfortable doing that. So I think I'm going to talk with them. I think I'll now start to maybe reserve only testing the ones that I plan on buying. That way I don't feel bad about it. But if you have any questions in particular, feel free to ask me down below. I do my best to get back with you. And I hope every one of y'all is having an absolute amazing day. Definitely go check out Blade & Beam, see what they have to offer. And if you're interested in the Mini Warrior, I will have a link down in the description. It is an affiliate link, so if you want to help support what I do here on this channel, helps me pay for my testing materials, that is so awesome and so kind. If not, no big deal. All right, guys and girls, I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.